Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel and watched the stars blur past the windows. His hands rested on the command chair, steady and calm. The ship hummed softly around him, a sound he had grown used to over the past 3 months of travel. They were close now. The coordinates the Galactic Council had sent were just ahead, marked clearly on the navigation screen. 3 years had passed since humanity discovered they were not alone in the universe. 3 years of careful messages sent back and forth through space, translated by computers that struggled to understand languages never spoken on Earth. 3 years of wondering what waited out there among the stars. Now they would finally know. Helen Carter approached from the side corridor carrying a datapad. She was the diplomatic advisor for this mission, a woman who had spent her entire career preparing for moments like this. Her gray suit was pressed perfectly, not a wrinkle visible. She stopped beside the captain's chair and cleared her throat. "The final protocol briefing is ready. Everyone is in the conference room," she said. Her voice was calm, but Brooks could hear the excitement underneath. This was history. They were about to become the first humans to formally meet the Galactic Council. Brooks nodded and stood up. Let's not keep them waiting. The conference room was small but comfortable. 12 people sat around the oval table, each one carefully chosen for this mission. These were humanity's best and brightest, the ones who would represent Earth to dozens of alien civilizations. Scientists, linguists, cultural experts, and military officers trained for months for this moment. Paul Green sat near the door, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. As chief security officer, he had spent weeks studying every piece of information they had about the Council species. Most of it was basic, almost frustratingly vague. The aliens had been polite but careful in their communications, offering little detail about their cultures or capabilities. Dr. Kevin Wright was reviewing something on his tablet, his fingers tapping quickly across the screen. The xenobiologist had been excited for weeks, barely sleeping as they approached the meeting point. He looked up when Brooks entered and smiled widely. "Captain, did you see the latest scans? The station is massive, at least 4 times bigger than anything we've built in orbit." "The architecture is incredible," Wright said. Brooks smiled slightly. "I saw it. Very impressive." Lisa Monroe sat at the head of the table, her hands folded in front of her. As the lead ambassador, she would speak first when they met the council. She had practiced her opening remarks hundreds of times, adjusting every word to be as clear and friendly as possible. The translation devices the council provided were good, but not perfect. Simple language worked best. "Everyone, thank you for coming," Monroe began. "We're about an hour from docking. I want to review the protocols one more time." The room fell silent. Everyone turned their attention to her. "First, we present ourselves as peaceful. No weapons, no aggressive postures, no sudden movements. We've been told the council includes 47 different species, and we don't know how each one might interpret our actions. What seems friendly to us might be threatening to them." Dr. Karen Phillips raised her hand. She was the team's environmental scientist, someone who understood how different worlds produce different life forms. "Do we know anything about their physical appearances? It would help to know if they're bipedal, or if they have similar sensory organs." Monroe shook her head. "The information they've shared is limited. We know they breathe oxygen-based atmospheres, at least most of them. Beyond that, we'll be learning as we go." Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair. The communications officer had been monitoring all transmissions between the ship and the station. They seemed friendly enough in their messages. Very polite, very welcoming. "I haven't detected any hostility." "That's good," Brooks said. "But let's stay alert. This is unprecedented for everyone involved. They're probably as nervous as we are." Helen Carter pulled up an image on the main screen. It showed the formal uniforms they would wear during the meeting. Dark navy fabric with silver accents on the shoulders and cuffs. They looked professional without being militaristic, exactly as intended. These were designed specifically to avoid any martial appearance, Carter explained. No badges that might look like rank insignia. No decorations that could be mistaken for weapons. Simple and clean. Lieutenant Susan Hayes studied the image carefully. She was part of the security team, but for this mission her job was to blend in and observe. "What about physical contact? Should we avoid handshakes or other gestures?" Monroe considered this. The council suggested we follow their lead. If they offer a greeting gesture, we can reciprocate carefully. If not, we keep our distance and simply bow or nod. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes. They discussed seating arrangements, speaking order, and emergency protocols. Every detail had been planned, every contingency considered. When they finished, Brooks stood and looked at each person in turn. This is it. Humanity's first real step into the galaxy. Whatever happens in that station, remember that you represent everyone back home. 4 billion people are counting on us to make a good impression. The crew nodded solemnly. Wright grinned. No pressure, right? Everyone laughed, and the tension in the room eased slightly. They filed out, heading to their quarters to change into the formal uniforms. Brooks remained behind with Monroe and Carter. Do you think they'll accept us? Monroe asked quietly. Brooks considered the question. I think they invited us here for a reason. They could have ignored our messages or told us to stay away. Instead, they reached out. That means something. Carter nodded. Still, we need to be careful. We don't know their politics, their fears, or their prejudices. One wrong word could set us back years. Then we won't say the wrong words, Brooks said firmly. An hour later, the horizon's end approached the station. It hung in space like a jewel, all crystalline surfaces and flowing curves. Lights glowed from within, creating patterns that seemed almost organic. It was beautiful in a way that human architecture rarely achieved, something that grew rather than was built. The docking procedure was smooth. The station's guidance systems took control of the ship, pulling it gently into a designated bay. Through the windows, the crew could see other vessels docked nearby. Strange ships with impossible geometries, hulls that seemed to shift colors, engines that produced no visible exhaust. Green watched the alien ships carefully. I'm not seeing any obvious weapons, but that doesn't mean much. Their technology could be centuries ahead of ours. Or behind, Wright added. We don't know where we fit in their technological hierarchy. The docking clamps engaged with a soft thunk. A corridor extended from the station to their airlock, sealing with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The crew gathered near the exit, checking their uniforms one last time. Monroe stood at the front, her expression calm and confident. The airlock opened. The corridor beyond was wide and tall, with walls that seemed to emit their own soft light. The air that flowed in was cool and carried strange scents, nothing unpleasant but certainly unfamiliar. Floral notes mixed with something metallic and something else entirely unidentifiable. 2 figures waited at the far end of the corridor. They were tall and thin, with skin that shimmered between blue and green. Forearms hung at their sides and large oval eyes watched the humans approach. They wore robes of some flowing material that moved despite the still air. Monroe stepped forward first, the rest of the delegation following in formation. As they walked, Brooks noticed details about the station. The gravity felt normal, exactly Earth standard. The temperature was comfortable. Even the lighting was in the visible spectrum humans preferred. The council had adjusted their environment for human comfort. The alien greeters didn't speak. Instead, they gestured with their upper arms, indicating the humans should follow. Monroe nodded and complied. The delegation moved through the station, passing other beings in the corridors. Small creatures that scurried along the walls, floating orbs that might have been robots or might have been living things, beings that looked almost humanoid, and others that defied easy description. Wright was trying to observe everything at once, his eyes wide with wonder. Phillips kept glancing at the environmental displays on the walls, reading what she could of the alien script. Hayes maintained a careful watch on their surroundings, looking for potential threats out of habit. They entered a massive chamber. The space was spherical, with platforms floating at different heights throughout the volume. Each platform held representatives of different species. Some were occupied by single large beings. Others hosted groups of smaller creatures. The variety was staggering. At the center of the sphere hung a larger platform clearly meant for the council leadership. A being waited there, tall and angular, with a body structure that reminded Brooks of a praying mantis. Its eyes were multifaceted and gleamed in the light. The human delegation was guided to an empty platform near the middle of the arrangement. As they stepped onto it, the platform rose smoothly to their designated position. Now they could see the full scope of the chamber. Hundreds of eyes from dozens of species watched them. Monroe took a breath and prepared to speak. This was the moment. First, Ambassador Lisa Monroe stood on the floating platform and felt the eyes of the galaxy upon her. She had prepared for this moment for months. practicing her greeting in front of mirrors and cameras until every word was perfect. But now, facing the actual Galactic Council, she felt something unexpected. The beings watching her were not simply curious or welcoming. They looked nervous. The translation device attached to her collar hummed softly as it activated. The Council had provided these devices weeks ago, small pieces of technology that would convert her words into something the various species could understand. She hoped it worked as promised. "Greetings, honored members of the Galactic Council," Monroe began. Her voice was clear and steady. "We come as representatives of humanity and the planet Earth. We are grateful for this opportunity to meet you and join the galactic community. We come in peace and friendship." The words were simple and direct, exactly as planned. She smiled as she spoke, wanting to convey warmth and openness. It was a basic human gesture of friendliness. Several delegates on nearby platforms suddenly moved backward. Their bodies shifted in ways that made Monroe pause. A small creature covered in blue fur made a high-pitched sound. Another being, something that looked like a collection of floating crystals, changed color from green to deep purple. A third delegate, resembling an upright otter with 6 legs, pressed itself against the back of its platform. Monroe's smile faltered. Something was wrong. Captain Brooks noticed it too. He stood slightly behind Monroe, observing the chamber carefully. The reaction to Monroe's greeting had been immediate and unmistakable. These beings were frightened, but why? They had invited humanity here. They had sent welcoming messages. What had changed? Dr. Kevin Wright leaned close to Brooks and whispered, "Captain, those are fear responses." "I'm almost certain of it. The color changes, the defensive posturing, the vocalizations, classic threat reaction behaviors." "But we haven't done anything threatening," Brooks whispered back. "I know, but they don't seem to agree." The mantis-like being on the central platform raised one of its limbs. The gesture seemed to call for attention. When it spoke, its voice came through the translation device as a series of clicks and whistles that resolved into words. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am High Counselor Zexthar, speaker for the assembled civilizations." The voice trembled slightly, something that even the translator couldn't hide. "We acknowledge your presence and your stated intentions of peace." Monroe nodded respectfully. "Thank you, High Counselor. We are honored to be here." Zexthar's head tilted in a way that might have been a nod or might have been something else entirely. "The Council has prepared questions for you. To better understand your species and your world, this is standard procedure for all new applicants to the Council." "Of course. We're happy to answer any questions," Monroe said. A new voice spoke up from a platform to the left. This being was small and round, covered in what looked like golden scales. Its voice was high and musical through the translator. "We wish to know about your home world. What are the conditions there?" Dr. Karen Phillips stepped forward. This was her area of expertise. She had prepared extensive documentation about Earth's environment. All of it meant to show that humanity came from a stable, life-supporting world. "Earth is a terrestrial planet in the habitable zone of our star," Phillips began. "We have liquid water, a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and a stable climate that supports diverse life forms. The gravity is 1.0 standard, and the atmospheric pressure at sea level is approximately 100 kilopascals." She spoke with enthusiasm, proud of her home world. But as the translation devices spread her words through the chamber, something strange happened. The delegates became very quiet. Several exchanged glances with their neighbors. The golden-scaled being who had asked the question seemed to shrink into itself. "Did you say 1.0 standard gravity?" another voice asked. This came from a tall, thin being that looked almost like a walking stick insect. "Yes, that's correct," Phillips confirmed. More murmuring spread through the chamber. Wright leaned toward Brooks again. Something about that answer bothered them. Zexthar raised a limb again, calling for quiet. "And your atmosphere. You said nitrogen-oxygen. What is the oxygen content?" Phillips checked her notes, though she knew the answer by heart. "Approximately 21% oxygen by volume. The rest is mostly nitrogen with trace amounts of other gases." The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of species began speaking at once, their various languages creating a cacophony that even the translation devices struggled to parse. Brooks saw several delegates gesturing frantically at their companions. Others seemed to be backing away from the human platform, despite the distance between them. "What just happened?" Monroe asked quietly, turning to her team. Wright was studying the reactions carefully. I think we just told them something that scared them. But I don't understand what. Those are normal planetary conditions for us. Helen Carter had been watching a group of smaller beings on a nearby platform. They were huddled together, and one of them kept pointing at the humans while speaking rapidly to the others. I don't think they're normal conditions for them. Zexthar was trying to restore order, but the chamber remained chaotic. Finally, the High Counselor made a sharp clicking sound that cut through the noise. Silence fell gradually. Humans of Earth, Zexthar said carefully, please understand that we mean no offense, but your world's conditions are unusually harsh by galactic standards. Most council species evolved on worlds with gravity between 0.6 and 0.8 standard. Your gravity is significantly higher. Brooks felt a cold realization settling over him. They had assumed that standard measurements were based on some universal average. It had never occurred to them that the standard might be set by the council species themselves. If most aliens came from lower gravity worlds, then humans would be exceptionally strong by comparison. And the oxygen content, another delegate added, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish. 21% is extremely high. Our species would require protective equipment in such an atmosphere. It would be toxic to us over time. Phillips looked confused, but the station's atmosphere seemed similar to Earth's. We're breathing comfortably here. The council adjusted this chamber for your comfort, Zexthar explained. Most of us are wearing protective equipment to survive in these conditions. We wanted to make you feel welcome. Brooks looked around the chamber with new eyes. Now he could see details he had missed before. Many of the delegates wore subtle devices that might be breathing apparatus. Others had thin, almost invisible barriers around their platforms, probably atmospheric shields. The council had transformed this meeting space into something humans could tolerate, and it was uncomfortable or even dangerous for many of them. We didn't realize, Monroe said softly. We apologize for any discomfort we've caused. No apology is necessary, Zexthar replied, though the tremor in the translated voice remained. We invited you. We knew adjustments would be required. Please continue. Tell us about your species. Lieutenant Susan Hayes had been quiet until now, standing near the back of the human delegation, but she noticed something troubling. Several platforms had armed guards on them, beings carrying devices that were almost certainly weapons. Those guards had moved closer to the edges of their platforms, positioning themselves between their delegates and the humans. She caught Green's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the guards. He saw them too and frowned. This wasn't the reception they had expected. Monroe decided to try a different approach. Perhaps talking about human culture would ease the tension. Humanity values cooperation and peaceful coexistence. We've worked hard to overcome our differences and unite our world. We have art, music, literature, and science. We're explorers and dreamers. She gestured broadly as she spoke, trying to convey enthusiasm and openness. Several delegates flinched at the sudden movement. Monroe froze, her arms still outstretched, realizing she had made another mistake. We're sorry, she said quickly, lowering her arms slowly. I didn't mean to startle anyone. Wright was watching a group of herbivorous-looking creatures on a far platform. They had large eyes positioned on the sides of their heads, typical prey animal configuration. When Monroe had gestured, they had reacted exactly like frightened deer ready to bolt. He whispered to Brooks, Captain, I think they see us as predators. Look at our eyes. Forward-facing binocular vision. That's a predator characteristic. And our teeth, when we smile, we show our teeth. To many species, that's a threat display. Brooks cursed softly. Everything humanity was doing to appear friendly was having the opposite effect. Their smiles showed teeth. Their upright posture and height made them tower over most delegates. Their simple gestures seemed aggressive to beings unused to such movements. What about your world's fauna? A new voice asked. This being was covered in soft white feathers and had large, gentle eyes. What other life shares your planet? Phillips brightened. This seemed like a safe topic. Earth has incredible biodiversity. Millions of species in every environment. We have mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, insects, and countless others. And humans, where do you fit in this ecosystem? The feathered being asked. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had changed completely. What should have been a celebration of first contact had become something closer to an interrogation. The Galactic Council asked questions and the human delegation answered, but every response seemed to make the situation worse. High Counselor Zexthar gestured to another delegate. a serpentine being with scales that reflected light like mirrors. The creature spoke in a hissing voice that the translator rendered as smooth and cold. Tell us about human physical capabilities. How strong are your people compared to what you consider normal? Lieutenant Susan Hayes glanced at Captain Brooks, uncertain how to answer. Brooks nodded slightly, encouraging her to be honest. There was no point in hiding the truth now. Well, the average human can lift approximately their own body weight without training. Hayes began carefully. With exercise and conditioning, we can lift several times our body weight. We have dense muscle tissue and sturdy skeletal structures to support movement in our gravity. The serpentine delegate's scales shifted color slightly. And you can function normally in 1.0 standard gravity? Walk, run, fight? Hayes bristled at the word fight but kept her voice level. Yes, that's our natural environment. We're adapted to it. Dr. Kevin Wright added, If I may, most humans actually complain that the station's gravity feels comfortable. Some of our delegation worried it might feel too light, but the council set it at Earth standard for us. We appreciate that consideration. Several delegates exchanged glances. A being made of what looked like living crystal spoke up, its voice chiming like bells. You mean this crushing weight is your normal? We increased the station's gravity to accommodate you. Most of us are operating under nearly double our comfortable range. The humans looked at each other in shock. They had assumed the station's gravity was normal for the council species, perhaps slightly adjusted. They hadn't realized the aliens were struggling under conditions that felt perfectly ordinary to humans. Monroe spoke quickly. We didn't know. We would never have asked you to suffer for our comfort. We could have adapted to lower gravity. We reviewed your physiological data, Sexthar said. Your bodies require 1.0 gravity for optimal function. Extended exposure to lower gravity causes bone density loss and muscle atrophy. We wanted to ensure you were comfortable during negotiations. Dr. Karen Phillips felt a wave of guilt wash over her. The council had transformed their station into something difficult and uncomfortable for themselves, all to make humans feel welcome. And now those same humans appeared as terrifying giants moving easily through conditions that strained their hosts. A small, furry delegate on a distant platform raised a paw, tentatively. When recognized, it spoke in a squeaking voice. What about your stamina? How long can humans exert themselves physically? Hayes considered the question. It seemed innocent enough. It varies by individual and training, but humans are persistence hunters by evolution. We can maintain moderate physical activity for hours. Some humans run marathons, which are races covering over 40 kilometers. Elite athletes can do this in just over 2 hours. The squeaking delegate made a sound of distress. Other beings shifted uncomfortably. The feathered creature from earlier spoke up, its voice trembling. You can chase prey for hours, until it collapses from exhaustion? Hayes realized her mistake too late. She had just described persistence hunting, one of humanity's oldest and most effective hunting strategies. To prey species, which many council members clearly were, this was nightmare material, an apex predator that never stopped coming, that chased its victims until they simply couldn't run anymore. That's ancient history, Monroe interjected quickly. Modern humans don't hunt like that. We have agriculture, farming, manufactured food. Most humans have never hunted at all, but the damage was done. Brooks could see it in the body language of the assembled delegates. They weren't hearing about ancient history. They were hearing about fundamental human capabilities, traits that evolution had hardwired into human biology. It didn't matter that modern humans didn't use these abilities for hunting. What mattered was that they could. Jake Morrison had been watching the chamber's communication systems, noting the various signals flowing between platforms. The aliens were talking among themselves, having private conversations that the humans couldn't hear. The volume of that communication had increased dramatically in the last few minutes. Captain, Morrison whispered, leaning close to Brooks. There's a lot of chatter happening. Encrypted channels, private networks. The delegates are talking to each other and to people off the station. Brooks frowned. Can you tell what they're saying? No, the encryption is beyond our systems. But the volume suggests they're very concerned about something. Helen Carter had been watching the guards positioned around various platforms. Their body language had changed. Earlier they had seemed merely alert. Now they appeared ready for action. Their weapons held in positions that suggested preparation rather than simple display. Ambassador Monroe, Carter said quietly, I think we need to address the tension in the room directly. This isn't getting better. Monroe nodded. She raised her voice to address the council. "Honored delegates, we can see that our presence makes some of you uncomfortable. That was never our intention. Perhaps we should discuss these concerns openly rather than continuing with formal questions." Zexthar's head tilted in that ambiguous gesture again. "Your honesty is appreciated, Ambassador Monroe. Very well. Let us speak plainly." The High Counselor gestured with multiple limbs indicating the assembled council. The Galactic Council represents 47 civilizations, spanning hundreds of worlds. We have achieved peace through careful balance and mutual understanding. Most of our member species evolved as prey animals or gentle omnivores. We built our civilizations through cooperation and shared resources, not through conflict and domination. Monroe listened carefully, beginning to understand the depth of the problem. When we received humanity's first messages, Zexathar continued, we were excited, a new species reaching out in friendship. But as we learned more about you, concerns arose. Your physical capabilities, your world's harsh conditions, your evolutionary history as apex predators. These things are foreign to most council members. A delegate that resembled a large, gentle slug spoke up. We have seen your entertainment media. The transmissions you broadcast into space. They show violence, warfare, conflict. Humans fighting each other, fighting aliens, fighting everything. Even your stories for children contain battles and struggles. Wright winced. He had worried about this. Humanity's entertainment was full of action and drama, which naturally included conflict. Movies about space exploration inevitably featured aliens as either enemies or threats. It was narrative convention, not actual human philosophy, but aliens analyzing those transmissions wouldn't know that. Those are just stories, Phillips protested. Fiction meant to entertain. They don't represent actual human intentions or behavior, but they represent human interests, the slug being countered. What a species chooses to entertain itself with reveals its nature. You find conflict entertaining. You create elaborate scenarios of warfare and survival. This is not comforting. Brooks stepped forward, his voice firm but not aggressive. With respect, you're making assumptions based on incomplete information. Yes, our entertainment includes conflict, but it also includes love, friendship, sacrifice, and cooperation. Our most beloved stories are often about overcoming differences and working together. Yet the conflicts in your stories are so violent, another delegate said. This being looked like a walking flower with petals that drooped sadly. Weapons that destroy cities. Battles that kill millions. Even when your stories end happily, the path there is paved with destruction. Monroe felt frustration building. How could they explain that human storytelling used conflict as a way to explore themes and emotions? That the violence in their fiction didn't reflect a desire for actual violence? Our stories are dramatic, she admitted. They exaggerate for emotional impact. Real human society is much more peaceful than our entertainment suggests. Is it? Zexthar asked quietly. We have studied your history, Ambassador. Wars spanning your entire world. Conflicts that lasted generations. Weapons capable of destroying all life on your planet. This is your recent past, not ancient history. The words hung in the air. No one on the human delegation could deny them. Earth's history was violent. The 20th and early 21st centuries had seen wars of unprecedented scale. The weapons Phillips had mentioned, nuclear arsenals capable of ending human civilization, those had existed within living memory. We're not proud of that history, Brooks said quietly, but we learned from it. We grew beyond it. Humanity united specifically because we recognized that our violent past would destroy us. We chose a different path. A choice you made only recently, the Serpentine delegate observed. What guarantee do we have that this choice is permanent? What prevents humanity from returning to its violent nature when faced with challenges or conflicts? Hayes felt anger rising. They were being judged for their past, for their biology, for things they couldn't change. Every species makes choices. The human delegation stood alone in the massive council chamber. Their floating platform hung motionless in the empty space, surrounded by hundreds of vacant platforms where alien delegates had sat just minutes before. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of the station systems. Ambassador Lisa Monroe sat down heavily, her formal posture finally breaking. She put her face in her hands for a moment before looking up at her team. That went about as badly as it possibly could have. Captain Daniel Brooks remained standing, his eyes scanning the chamber. They're frightened of us. Everything we said, everything we are, it scares them. We should have prepared better, Dr. Karen Phillips said miserably. We should have realized how different we are. The gravity, the atmosphere, our physical capabilities. It's all so obvious now. Helen Carter shook her head. We couldn't have known. They didn't tell us anything specific about their species. We had no frame of reference for what's normal in the galaxy. Lieutenant Paul Green stood near the edge of the platform, looking at the exits where the delegates had disappeared. What happens now? Do they send us home? Do they quarantine us? Or do they see us as a threat to be eliminated? Lieutenant Susan Hayes added quietly. The words chilled everyone. It was a possibility none of them wanted to consider. But it was there nonetheless. If the Council decided humanity was too dangerous to join the galactic community, what would they do about it? Earth was defenseless against alien technology. A single Council warship could probably devastate human civilization. Jake Morrison had pulled out his tablet and was working quickly, his fingers flying across the screen. I'm trying to access the station's public networks. Maybe I can find out what they're saying about us. Dr. Kevin Wright moved closer. Can you do that? Won't it be encrypted or protected? Morrison shook his head, focused on his work. Their security is focused on preventing malicious intrusion, but I'm not trying to break into anything sensitive. I'm just looking for public communications, the stuff they'd let anyone see. The problem is their network protocols are completely different from ours. How long will it take? Brooks asked. Already done, Morrison replied, looking surprised. Their security is actually less sophisticated than I expected. Or rather, it's sophisticated in different ways. They're protected against threats they understand. But our technology is just different enough that their systems don't recognize it as a potential intrusion. I'm in the public network. Monroe moved to look at the tablet screen. What can you see? News feeds mostly. Public announcements, general communications. Let me translate this. Morrison pulled up the translation software they had been given by the Council. The alien text began converting to English, though slowly and imperfectly. What they read made their situation clear. The news feeds were full of reports about the human delegation. Analysis pieces discussed human capabilities, comparing them to known galactic standards. The numbers were stark. Humans were, on average, 40% stronger than the strongest common council species. The atmospheric conditions humans preferred would injure or kill most aliens after prolonged exposure. Human bone density was nearly double what was typical for beings of similar size. Listen to this, Morrison said, reading from one feed. Human homeworld classified as Class 4 death world. Survival conditions extreme by galactic standards. Gravity 1.0. Oxygen toxicity level high. Temperature variation severe. Native life forms show corresponding adaptations. Predatory ecosystem dominant. Death world? Phillips repeated. They think Earth is a death world? Wright was reading over Morrison's shoulder. It makes sense from their perspective. If most council species evolved on gentler worlds, Earth would seem incredibly hostile. The gravity alone would be crippling for many of them. Monroe found another feed, this one analyzing human entertainment transmissions. The analysis was detailed and deeply concerning. The alien researchers had cataloged thousands of hours of human media, identifying patterns and themes. Their conclusion was that humans were a warlike species obsessed with conflict, violence, and domination. They've been watching our movies and TV shows, Carter said, reading the report. Everything from war films to superhero movies to science fiction, and they're interpreting all of it literally. Brooks saw one analysis that discussed persistence hunting. The author, an alien biologist, described it as one of the most terrifying hunting strategies in the known galaxy. The idea of a predator that simply never stopped chasing its prey, that ran it down over hours or days until exhaustion made escape impossible, was apparently the stuff of nightmares for prey species. They're terrified of us, Hayes said softly, not just nervous or concerned. Actually terrified. Morrison scrolled through more feeds, finding discussions among various species representatives. The tone was universally worried. Some delegates argued that humanity should be rejected immediately, kept quarantined on Earth for galactic safety. Others suggested observation and careful monitoring. A very few, argued that humanity deserved a chance to prove itself. Then Morrison found something else. A secure channel that wasn't quite secure enough. Military communications between the station's defense forces and fleet elements positioned in the surrounding space. Captain, you need to see this, Morrison said urgently. Brooks leaned in to read. His expression darkened. There are warships out there. Lots of them. 16 vessels, Morrison confirmed. All armed, all on high alert. They've formed a perimeter around the station. Monroe felt her stomach drop. They're not there to welcome us. They're there in case we turn hostile. Green was checking his own equipment, scanning what he could of the station's systems. I'm detecting weapon systems on the station itself. Point defense grids, what might be missile launchers, energy weapons. This place is armed. It's a diplomatic station, Carter protested. Why would it be armed? Because we're here, Brooks said grimly. They prepared for the possibility that first contact could go wrong. They're ready to fight if necessary. The realization settled over the group like a weight. The Galactic Council had invited humanity to a peace meeting, but they had also prepared for war. Every friendly gesture, every welcoming word, had been backed by military force positioned to strike if the humans proved as dangerous as the Council feared. What do we do? Phillips asked. How do we fix this? Monroe didn't have an answer. They had come in peace, but peace wasn't enough. The Council didn't just need reassurance. They needed proof that humanity could be trusted, evidence that humans weren't the violent predators their biology and history suggested. Morrison was still working with his tablet, pulling up more information. He found internal council documents, reports from intelligence services that had been analyzing humanity for the past 3 years. The documents were marked as restricted, but Morrison's unusual access had found them anyway. You all need to read this, he said quietly. The intelligence report was comprehensive and damning. It detailed human history in brutal honesty. The wars, the genocides, the nuclear weapons. It analyzed human biology, noting redundant organs, efficient healing, high pain tolerance, and the ability to function despite injuries that would incapacitate most species. It discussed human psychology, describing pack loyalty, territorial instincts, and the human capacity for violence when threatened. But there was more. The report also noted human creativity, curiosity, and capacity for compassion. It discussed human art, music, and literature. It mentioned human rescue instincts, the tendency to help even strangers in distress. It acknowledged that humans formed deep emotional bonds and showed remarkable dedication to protecting the weak. The conclusion was ambivalent. Humans were dangerous, yes, but they were also complex, capable of both great violence and great kindness. The report recommended cautious engagement, suggesting humanity might be valuable allies if properly integrated into the galactic community. But it also warned that humans could become serious threats if they felt rejected or attacked. They don't know what to make of us, Wright observed. We don't fit their categories. We're predators who choose to be peaceful, Hayes said. That probably seems impossible to them. Like a contradiction. Monroe stood and paced the platform, thinking hard. They needed to change the Council's perception, to show humanity in a different light. But how? Every fact about human biology, every piece of human history seemed to reinforce the idea that humans were dangerous. We need to talk to them again, Monroe decided. When they come back, we need to be honest and direct. No more diplomatic dancing. We tell them the truth about humanity, all of it, and let them decide. Brooks wasn't sure that would work. They already know the truth, Ambassador. That's why they're scared. They know facts, Monroe corrected. They don't understand context. They don't see the whole picture. Carter considered this. What if we show them instead of just telling them? Demonstrate what humanity really is? How? Green asked. We're stuck on this platform in an empty chamber, surrounded by aliens too frightened to come near us. Before anyone could answer, a sound echoed through the chamber. The delegates were returning. The platforms began floating back into position, carrying their occupants to their designated spots. But something was... Ambassador Lisa Monroe looked at High Counselor Zexthar and made a decision. No more careful diplomacy, no more measured responses designed to avoid offense. The Council wanted truth, and truth was what she would give them. You want to know why humanity seeks membership in the Galactic Council? Monroe asked. The answer is simple. We're lonely. The words seemed to echo in the vast chamber. Several delegates shifted position, clearly not expecting such a direct emotional response. Monroe continued, her voice steady but filled with genuine feeling. For our entire history, humanity believed we were alone in the universe. We looked at the stars and wondered if anyone else was out there, if anyone else looked back. When we discovered that we weren't alone, that the galaxy was full of life and civilization, it changed everything. We realized we had a chance to be part of something larger than ourselves. She gestured to her team. We didn't come here seeking resources or territory. Earth provides everything we need. We came because we want to learn from you. We want to share what we know. We want to be part of a community that spans the stars. Captain Daniel Brooks stepped forward. High Counselor, I understand your concerns about humanity. I won't pretend our history is peaceful. I won't claim we're not physically capable of violence. But I want you to understand something about humans that your intelligence reports might have missed. Sexthar tilted his head. Speak. You're right that Earth is a harsh world by your standards, Brooks said. The gravity is high, the atmosphere is corrosive, the environment is challenging. But those same conditions that made us strong also made us something else. They made us empathetic. A murmur went through the council. The Serpentine delegate spoke up. How does a death world create empathy? Dr. Kevin Wright answered. Because suffering is universal on Earth. Every human knows pain, knows struggle, knows what it feels like to be hurt or afraid. When you grow up in a world where everyone experiences hardship, you learn to care about others. You learn that cooperation is more valuable than conflict. Dr. Karen Phillips added, humans developed complex social structures specifically to support each other through difficult times. We take care of our sick and injured. We share resources with those who have none. We protect children and elderly who can't protect themselves. These aren't recent developments. They're ancient instincts as old as humanity itself. Sexthar listened carefully. Yet you also developed weapons and warfare. Yes, Brooks admitted. We did, and every war taught us how terrible violence truly is. We learned, High Counselor. We learned that the strongest among us have a responsibility to protect the weak, not exploit them. We learned that cooperation achieves more than domination. Helen Carter spoke up. You analyzed our entertainment media and saw violence. But did you notice what else is there? Our most beloved stories are about unlikely heroes protecting others, about people sacrificing themselves for strangers, about finding common ground with those who seem different. Monroe saw that some delegates were listening with what might be interest rather than fear. She decided to try something different. High Counselor, may I suggest something? Instead of just talking, let us show you who humans really are. Give us a chance to demonstrate our nature through actions rather than words. Sexthar considered this. What do you propose? Monroe looked at her team, an idea forming. Let us interact naturally. Ask us to do something together, to solve a problem or complete a task. Watch how we work with each other. Judge us by what you see rather than what you fear. There was a long pause. Then Sexthar gestured with multiple limbs. Very well. The council has prepared a scenario. A test of sorts, though you were not supposed to know of it. We will implement it now. The chamber's lighting changed. Holographic projections appeared, creating a simulated environment around the human platform. It showed a disaster scenario, a ship in distress with crew members needing rescue. The simulation was clearly designed to test how humans responded to crisis. Lieutenant Paul Green immediately began assessing the situation, analyzing the holographic ship's damage and the location of survivors. Lieutenant Susan Hayes coordinated with him, identifying priority targets for rescue. Jake Morrison worked to establish communications with the simulated ship, but then something unexpected happened. Monroe stepped back and let her team work without interference. She didn't give orders or demand control. Instead, she watched as the 12 humans naturally organized themselves, each person contributing their expertise without being told. Brooks took charge of the overall strategy, but he listened to input from everyone. When Phillips suggested a different approach to reaching certain survivors, he immediately adjusted the plan. When Wright warned about environmental hazards, Hayes modified her rescue priorities. The council watched as the humans worked together with fluid efficiency. There was no arguing, no fighting for dominance. Each person trusted the others to handle their responsibilities. When one person needed help, others stepped in without hesitation. Morrison established communication with the simulated survivors and spoke with calm reassurance, promising rescue. His voice was gentle despite the crisis. Phillips worked with Wright to ensure the rescued individuals would receive proper medical care. Carter coordinated resources, making sure no one was forgotten. The simulation ran for 20 minutes. In that time, the humans rescued every survivor, stabilized the damaged ship, and even managed to save some of the ship's cargo when Morrison noted it contained medical supplies that could help other vessels in the area. When the simulation ended, the chamber fell silent. The delegates watched the humans catch their breath, saw them smile at each other and exchange quiet words of encouragement. Hayes put a hand on Green's shoulder, congratulating him on spotting a critical detail. Brooks nodded to Morrison, acknowledging his quick thinking. It was Helen Carter who noticed it first. Several of the alien delegates had moved closer, their platforms drifting toward the human position. The barriers and shields were still up, but the body language had changed. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe hope. The golden-scaled delegate who had spoken earlier raised a small limb. That was impressive coordination. You work together without conflict or hierarchy disputes. We trust each other, Monroe explained. That's what teams do. We each have strengths, and we rely on those strengths while covering for weaknesses. No one person can do everything, so we work together. The slug-like being spoke up, its voice softer than before. But your captain gave orders. The others obeyed. Is that not hierarchy? Brooks smiled slightly. It's leadership, not domination. The difference is that my team trusts me to make good decisions. And I trust them to tell me when I'm wrong. Monroe changed my plan twice during that simulation, and I listened both times because her ideas were better than mine. Monroe nodded. Humans learned a long time ago that the best leaders are those who listen, not those who demand obedience. Lieutenant Peter Cole, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Can I show you something? It's not related to the simulation, but I think it's important. At Monroe's nod, Cole pulled out his personal tablet. This is a recording from Earth from a human city. I want you to see what normal human behavior looks like. He projected the recording into the chamber. It showed a busy street in a human city. Thousands of people moving in different directions, going about their daily lives. The recording focused on small moments. A person helping an elderly individual cross the street, someone stopping to pet a dog and smile at its owner, a group of strangers working together to help someone whose vehicle had broken down, children playing in a park while adults watched and laughed. This is humanity, Cole said quietly. Not the wars you read about in our history. Not the violence in our entertainment. This is what humans actually do most of the time. We live, we laugh, we help each other. We find joy in simple things. The recording continued, showing more scenes. A human hospital where doctors worked tirelessly to save lives. A school where teachers educated children with patience and care. A community coming together to rebuild after a natural disaster. Everyone contributing without being asked. Dr. Wright added context. Humans evolved as social creatures. We survive through cooperation. Yes, we're capable of violence when threatened, but our default state isn't aggression. It's community. The feathered delegate, who had been one of the most fearful earlier, spoke in a trembling voice. You keep animals as companions? Not as food or labor? Philip smiled. We call them pets. Dogs, cats, birds, many others. We keep them because they make us happy. They provide emotional support and companionship. Many humans consider their pets to be family members. But you are predators, the feathered being said, confused. Apex predators. Yet you protect and cherish smaller, weaker creatures? Because we can, Hayes answered simply. We're strong enough that we don't have to be cruel. We're secure enough that we can afford to be kind. Monroe saw understanding beginning to dawn in some of the delegates. They were starting to see what the humans had been trying to explain. Humanity's strength didn't make them dangerous to friends. It made them valuable as allies and protectors. Zexthar spoke again, his voice different now. Still cautious, but with an